To both groups, I say coaching works. Coaching works. I resisted the idea of giving this much of myself over to somebody for quite a long time in order to receive the kind of thoughtful advice that I've received over the last 6 months, and it has been completely game changing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Everyday Talent Podcast. This is your go-to podcast for creators who are looking for new ways of thinking about their career, life, and practice. I'm your host, Betty. I'm a filmmaker, fundraising consultant, and a coach for creators. I've coached creatives to build their practice so that they allow them to have agency and freedom to make their art and make happier money. On today's episode, I invited one of my clients to come and have a conversation with me, Nguyen. He's a photographic artist and creative business owner based in Calgary. He's one of the most sought-after performance arts photographers in Calgary. And he also has many other artistic passions. From our very first conversation, when Tim came on and have a free consult call with me, I knew that our values were really aligned because he asked or said something to me that till this day, I still really remember that moment. He said, Betty, I'm not interested in looking for a coach that will ask me to just get richer clients and that will take care of all my problems. And I also remember what I responded at the time is that I'm not a coach that just care about you making money. I care about your holistic being and well-being. I think this moment of powerful value alignment that him and I share is actually a common trait among a lot of you who are listening to this podcast. We make art, we create, and we care about our community. Our values are the very foundation for building the creator practice that we have thus far. Or else, why are we in the art anyway? But here's the thing. Once we get to that stage in our career that we've gotten some achievements, some success, many of us do hit a roadblock. Something is not working anymore with the current setup of our creative practice or creative career. It might not be serving all of our life needs, but we also don't want to walk away from it completely or ditch our values or our purpose. What do we do at that stage then? I think my client team today on the podcast has the most wonderful insights to share on this topic. His journey as a photographic artist, as a creative solopreneur, and as someone who is deeply rooted in his community and values is one that I admire and resonate with. And I'm also really inspired working with him, seeing his commitment and daringness in making shifts as a mid-career artist. So without further ado, let's welcome to the podcast, Tim. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Talent Podcast. Today, I'm so excited as I invited my client as well as a theatrical photographer, Tim, to join this podcast and conversation. Welcome, Tim. Hello.
Hi, hello. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Tim, I know that you do many things, not just theater photography. Why don't you tell the audience what your work encompasses, what you do?
Sure. So my name is Tim Nguyen. My pronouns are he, him, and I am Calgary's go-to stage arts documentarian right now. On an average year, I cover about 30% of the professional performing arts in the city, mostly drama and dance. I also do videography and graphic design. Videography has been an extended part of my theatrical photography work, particularly in the pandemic. I've been able to pivot a lot of the still photography into video recording and online streaming, which was one of my contributions to the arts community in Calgary, particularly in the middle part of the pandemic when theater had shifted online and was largely was just people reading scripts into a Zoom camera, and it was completely unwatchable. And it was great attempts, but it had to be something else. And so I've spent the last couple of years working towards a much more watchable video product for streaming theater. Uh, I also run a studio downtown called Studio 323, where I do headshots and advertisements, mostly focused on the performing arts community as well. Um, I won the Best of Calgary survey in 2020 for best photographer, which was really cool. Brought the business back in the early pandemic as well. I've been a multiple top 40 under 40 nominee, have yet to win, but that'll come hopefully next year. And I think those are sort of the high level points about me. I am the yeah I'm a go to in Calgary right now for a lot of this, and it's an extremely privileged position to be in. I have no right to complain, that's for sure.
Yeah. And as we go on this conversation, I'm sure we'll dive into the different nuances of your work. Like just building onto what you're saying, that you do many things. You run a studio, you serve different clients, mainly in performing arts, but not exclusive. I know that you run basically your own operation by your own. Tell us a
That's
little
right.
bit of like how you kind of came to that route and what are the pros and cons of running your photography practice and your whole practice on your own.
Sure. So my trajectory to get here, I started off as a theater kid. My high school experience was largely looking for a place of acceptance and a place that I could just be myself, and I really found a home in that in the drama club, in the theater. And so that was where I stayed, and I'm incredibly grateful that that's been the case. I went to the University of Calgary and I did my Bachelor of Fine Arts there, and I had a really significant experience towards the end of my third year where I had the realization that acting was not driving me anymore. It wasn't the calling that I thought it was. And so I sat my acting professor down and I said, I'm not going to do the fourth year acting program. I'm going to take a step back and figure out what it is that I want to be doing. And it was one of these really it was, for me at the time, it was the most difficult pivot that I had ever made. I was 21 or 22 at the time. Um, but that gave me elbow room. It gave me some time to experiment and explore other art forms. And I didn't want to leave the theater per se. I just knew that I wasn't meant to be on stage. So I spent some time um, doing history classes and doing more theory based things. And I was already a kid that had the camera in school. Now, dating myself a little bit, this is early mid aughts that I'm talking about. No camera phones. Digital cameras were pretty limited access. So when I say I was the kid with the camera that was around, it put me in kind of my own category because that wasn't a common experience for folks at the time. So what that also means is that I had the opportunity to just be the one that people would come to for photos. So by the time I graduated, I was already doing headshots for actually the class that I opted not to be a part of actors that were graduating. And the summer after that, one or two couples that had formed during that program went and got married, and they asked me to cover their weddings as well. So it was this like slow snowballing of different kinds of work that happened organically out of being in that community. And that's not to say that all of my work ended up that way. I have also done a ton of oil and gas related work being in Calgary. I've done a ton of corporate real estates. Um, I tried to be part of the fashion community here at one point. I have spent my time photographing weddings and events. Um, I sponsored the TEDx YYC conference one year and did the volunteer photography by myself. But you had asked about the solo part. Let me wind this all back. You had
Yeah,
asked about
but that
the
was a great trajectory because I'm hearing like you there was a lot of like building awareness
yeah,
and then
there
like
was.
figuring out let's go to this route, let's try this out. And I think it leads very well into, the conversation about like being a solopreneur basically
Mhm.
and a sole practitioner in your business. Yeah. Tell
Well, I
us a
think
bit more. Hmm.
I think some of it came almost out of necessity. I do really niche work in an already niche community. So Finding out over time that the thing that was the most satisfying for me was being an arts documentarian. um, was a really big deal. Figuring out just even putting that phrasing to it gave me a lot more clarity to go forward. So in terms of working for myself and the pros and cons of running my own business and being kind of a one person island, um, I appreciate being able to make my own schedule. There's sort of these high level like typical things that self employed people will say, like setting my own hours, setting my own boundaries. Um, I do find that working as a generalist photographer, as we talk about being spread out over all these different markets,
Yeah.
it has kept me in a place where I have to present myself as a generalist photographer. I am a jack of all photography.
Hmm.
My website is a good example of that. It's arts on this side, headshots here, and then a bunch of corporate friendly stuff, just in case that kind
Mm.
of work still comes in. And that's been fine for the most part. But it's meant that I haven't had as many opportunities to market myself as
Mm.
just an arts documentarian, just a stage arts photographer, and that's been a frustrating experience. So
Mm.
on the cons side of being a solopreneur, I feel like the lack of sounding boards at times has been a big detriment. I feel like being able to push back against clients when they're pushing my boundaries, or where they're asking too much, has been a challenge at times. But more than anything, recognizing the burnout, recognizing when I'm tired
Yeah.
and when I need to recharge and exercise a little bit of self care has that's taken the longest to internalize and to really make part of my practice, like a part of my daily life. I think at this point.
Yeah, thank you for being candid with us. There's so much that you should just share that I want to kind of go into it one by one. So, Tim, you were talking about that the niche in the performance arts like community, and I know that
Hmm.
community is a big value of yours, and we talk about that kind of from day one when we met. Uh,
Definitely.
and I'm curious, like, how does your value of rooted in community, and specifically the performance arts community, factor into your practice?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question. Thank you. Well, at at the highest level, I feel like I self-describe as an anti-capitalist. And so what that means for me is that I'm resistant to moving I'm resistant to working with people or moving in a direction that I feel like is against my morality, or that I feel like will work against the best interests of my community. And um, so not being someone who is driven by money or power, I feel like my biggest driver is just wanting to connect with people and to make the artwork. It's why I work in the arts in the first place, is to be an artist. Uh, at the same time, like I'm also aware, and I feel like I've said this to you before, that if I could do this for free and still have like my bills covered and stuff, I would. There's I have a healthy distaste for the admin side of running a business and for dealing with the money at all. I feel like money changes people and it changes art significantly, and that doesn't sit as well for me. Um, One of the other things that's come up quite a bit in my life prior to you and I meeting, in my journey of trying to find a coach, one of the things that kept coming up was uh, I was pushed towards always, what was the phrasing they used? The overall messaging from other
Mm,
coaches in my experience has been to get richer clients, find
right.
wealthier people to serve. And having both grown up in an underfunded community and now working in that same underfunded community, it just doesn't sit well with me to be told by other coaches that the best course of action is to dump the people that you're working with, move on to greener pastures. And when that's the advice that's given time and time and time again, it doesn't sit well. It festers this resentment for that mentality. So knowing that I'm holding on to these values of wanting to serve this community plays into the feeling that I carry a lot of the time, where I want to support the underdog. I want to work for the little guy, because I've frequently felt like the little guy. and being able to go to bat for the little guy has been, I think, one of those like unspoken parts of my career that I hadn't had the articulation for until recently. It was something that I kind of was aware of, but didn't know quite how to express.
Yeah. It's so I resonate so much with what you share, and I'm sure to the audience that's listening to this podcast is often autistic people listening to this podcast that like we do have like issues with like mass consumption or capitalism in general, and like as artists we have something to say about those things,
Yeah,
and then we are hit by the reality or the noise that's saying that you like the sure route to make yourself more sustainable is get richer clients. And it's a very definite answer usually out there. And it seems really at odds with why we started doing that. And
hmm
I heard that struggle initially when we met for the first time. I had the first call, and I'm reminded of that in my own experience as well. And as we've talked about it, it's not really necessary doing like this black and white definition of like going like just do the richer clients or like the like full on embrace like the starving artist life, because I think that we need to kind of find the balance of like how to build a practice that is sustainable but still hone in our values. And sometimes I feel like they just get presented as opposite ends when they don't have to.
you're right. They don't have to be, and that is largely how it's been presented to me by coaches in the past, and then you and I connected, and suddenly the conversation wasn't about how wealthy the neighborhoods you're advertising in are. It wasn't about how I can turn a headshot session into a branding session, into a boudoir session, into like three or four other upsells. Um, I'm not going to try and claim that those systems of approach don't work, but what I will say is they don't work for me. They grate against my morality. They grate against the type of work that I'm trying to do. And if it means that my payday at the end of all this is a bit lower, but I get to sleep better at night, I'm okay with that. I'm
Mhm.
perfectly okay with that.
You said it so well just now about like it's not that those approaches don't work; they don't work for you. And I feel like I can talk about this and like on for days. It's like it really ends up being like what success means to different people looks very differently, right? And tell us a bit more about like what's your definition of success now for your practice or just for yourself in general.
Whew. Um,
I
my
know, no
definition
pressure.
of my definition for success now, I think has curbed quite a bit. I'm not sure that I could really put a finger on what my definition was when you and I started this process. Um, I think that was one of the things that I was looking for, and over the course of was it been 3 months, longer, 8 sessions
For
stretched out over 4
4 months, right?
4
We there's 1 month that I got COVID, so it
right.
became 5 months.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, over the course of 5 months, I have gone from asking those types of questions, what is success supposed to be, to looking more inward and trying to find what I'm actually going to be satisfied doing with my time. What I'm going to be satisfied spending my personal time, the hours of my life doing. And if that's spent not maximizing my capital income, okay. It probably means that I'm spending the time doing something that is going to improve my life, improve my mental health, improve my overall well-being in some other arena. And I feel like as a solopreneur that did not carry that mindset for the first forever of my career, it's high time to pay attention to stuff like that. And so I'm really grateful that I've made that mentality shift from flailing and assuming that success will present itself at some point, or that I will find this like golden perfect definition of success that will then shed all of the other apprehension and anxiety around me.
Mhm.
That doesn't exist. So I put the mental energy into the exploration work with you and finding out what the hell it was that I was trying to do to pivot my career and my business and my time expenditures into something that I actually wanted to be doing. And that was a huge watershed over the last few months, and I'm very grateful that we got to do that.
I'm grateful as well. I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that sometimes we think about career pivot and or business pivot as those like strategic, like, you know, where do I market or like where do I get like bigger paying clients? And those
Hmm.
things, like, again, they're not that, like, it's not that they're not important, and they can work. But like, it sounds like from your journey, and I know from your journey, it was a lot also about internal exploration of like what matters to me now. Now that
Yeah,
I've like built this practice and it seems to be going on a roll, but there were some internal things that we needed to explore about your pivot.
that's right. And over the course of 4 or 5 months that we've been doing this, I've pivoted several times. Pivoted between various ideas that have presented themselves to me. In the middle of this process, you and I were having a conversation about whether or not I should sign a $250,000 real estate lease and pivot to doing a much larger studio business. Um, I'm really glad that that's not the direction that I moved, but I feel like there would have been validity in doing that. Um, there would have been less. There may have been more money involved ultimately, but there would have been less satisfaction involved, and I would have suddenly found myself only doing that. And that wasn't exactly what I wanted to spend the time on either. So, um, pivoting has been a major recurring theme throughout this whole process for us, and it was something that I was unable to do solo. I've come to realize I was attempting to pivot multiple times prior to finding you, and every time I figured out that I would get 3 or 4 steps down into the process and then just stop. I wouldn't know how to go further than that, or the next more appealing thing would come along, the shinier thing would come along, and I would go down a different path all of a sudden. And so nothing was progressing, nothing was coming to any kind of completion, and that became a huge point of frustration. And you focused a lot of that with me.
Well, I want to kind of add that, but there's so much that I want to circle back. But since you mentioned it, because I think that one of the things that, like, even when I started looking for a coach, I say, well, a lot of this I can do it by myself. Like, I can make decision on
Hmm.
my, like, you too. Like, you've started your business without, like a coach's help. Like, there's a lot that you can do and make decision on your own.
Oh yeah.
Tell us, like, the audience, that, like, what is it about having someone else, like a coach support, that makes those decisions more landed better for you?
I appreciate how you phrase that. I think using us as a specific example, I think your process of mirroring a lot of my statements back at me during the coaching process, even in this call, you've said us several times, like I hear this, I hear you saying this, and then repeating through your interpretation what it is that's been said. um, I realized really early on in the process that that's not something I have a lot of experience in. I haven't had much mentorship or much coaching throughout my career, and to hear it, to have somebody genuinely invest their time and to reflect back what it is that I'm saying in a thoughtful way, it was more than just actually getting advice. It was being seen and heard and being encouraged, and so the feeling of support that came through this process has meant just as much to me as any of the actual answers or solutions that we've come up to. Um, I'm aware, and I'll just preface this. I'm aware that I've done myself a disservice a lot throughout my career in not seeking out mentorship or coaching, and there's other stuff behind that. But now that I'm here, and now that the coaching has unfolded, and I've actually seen the process of what happens between just asking questions into the void versus having a sounding board and a mentor to bring a second, third, and fourth perspective to the conversation, has been completely transformative in just how I'm conducting myself, how I'm approaching the business, how I show up to this desk, day to day now has all changed, much for the better.
Yeah, and you sort of kind of beautifully describe like what the value of the coaching is. It's like providing a mirror. It's not that like I'm solving, like I always say this, it's not that I'm solving your issue for you, like
Hmm.
necessarily, but it's really having that like uh train ear there, and like being able to mirror back, and also like making you feel seen and supported, so that like I think that like I mean there's a lot of neuro uh brain science that can experience when we are in a place that we feel supported and seen. That's where like our we get creative and be able to come up with solutions on our own as well.
Absolutely.
So let's circle back to one big topic that like is kind of the elephant in the room that you mentioned at the beginning, which is burnout.
Hmm.
Burnout is a huge thing for everybody in the arts, but also I think very particular to people who are running their own practice, because I know that for a fact, like, you know, when you run your own practice, you have nobody else to go to when you're sick. Uh, when you need to deliver, you need to deliver, and
Yep.
especially after a few years, it really creeps up. If you may share with us and the audience, like your experience with burnout and how you managed it.
I can attempt to. Um, my burnout has been somewhat of a layered experience. I'll start by saying that. I've been experiencing some variation or some level of intensity of executive dysfunction for the majority of the pandemic. I actually feel like I was sort of careening into burnout when the pandemic hit, and have said a number of times that the first year of the pandemic was the first time that I had rested that much since going solo, which is not a healthy thing to say. I'm very aware of that. These were not bragging points. These were just like me finally being honest with myself. Um, I shit. I've lost my thread.
You're talking
In the
about
pro.
kind of like your burnout has
Thank
multi-layer
you.
experience. Yeah.
That was a good time to lose the thread because burnout does that sometimes too.
Yes. Mhm.
um,
Totally. Mhm.
in that same sense of a layered experience, I was also diagnosed with ADHD this year at 38 years old, and that's been a huge element to this experience. It involves rejection sensitivity. It involves a different layer of executive dysfunction and a number of other things. So managing the burnout while being kind of marred in this confusion, plus having an overactive mind to begin with, it meant that there wasn't a lot of opportunity that I gave myself to slow down, to rest, to internalize what was actually happening. It was a lot of just reacting to what people wanted from me. If there was a request that came in, that went to immediately to the top of the pile, just so that I could action it, so I could get it taken care of. And that became kind of the default process: is let's keep the plate clear as much as possible, so that my anxiety comes down because I'm not managing anything else.
Mm.
And well, that was a process that was sustained for several years. And I mean, I went solo middle of 2016, and have been
Mm.
working for myself since. And yeah, like you said at the start of this section, about 5 years in, you really start to notice it. And that was where it crept up on me. I got about 5 years in, and suddenly, I won't say the wheels started coming off, but I felt less assured as a person. I felt like I was second guessing myself quite a bit, and the exhaustion led to a lot of like just mental confusion. I would lose my place. I would become confused here and there. That in a way that I had to hit stop and really collect myself before I can move forward again. And that became a more recurring process. So
Mhm.
addressing burnout has been a lot of uh, things that I think fall under like self-care kind of tropes. I've started doing more yoga. I walk around my neighborhood quite a bit more. Being in Calgary, I'm only an hour away from the mountains, so we get to drive out to the mountains and
Yeah.
have some fresh, crisp air whenever possible. Uh, and I've put some conscious effort into rebuilding a social life. because that was the other part of working from home as a solopreneur that really got away from me, and I didn't see it coming nor notice it till I was right in the middle, and that's that your social life just vanishes. Uh, my hours when I wasn't keeping track of them, when I wasn't setting hard boundaries around my office hours and my post production time, meant that I spent all my time here. Meant that until my plate was clear, I was going to continue to work, and those were other unhealthy habits that formed and locked in because for a long time, without mentorship, without feedback or sounding boards, uh, that was the best success strategy that I had found to that point. That was the thing that was working, and so of course I'm going to lean into that. I'm going to keep going with that,
Yeah.
even though it's not the most efficient process. It's one that has a path to completion, and efficiency or not, that's what I'm looking for. And over time, those kinds of solutions lock in, and the higher effort versions that I didn't know they were the higher effort versions. Those things lock in, and so suddenly I'm expending this much more energy in all directions when I don't have to be, but I don't know any better because this is what's all settled. This is how I've learned to do it, figuring it all out on the fly on my own. Um, and so I think coming full circle, once I found effective coaching strategies that worked, I got to start to unpack those things. I got to start to pull that apart and look at from an objective perspective where I had been screwing this up, where I had been putting too much energy out, and you've done a great deal of work with me to find more efficient strategies along the way.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that is that like what I think is amazing about like by the time that you started working with me, you were upfront for the session one that you like I got diagnosed ADHD earlier, and I'm sensitive to rejection. Like you're very aware by the time
That
that we've
was
met.
that was right off the top. I remember that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Like you put it in the I think it's onboarding. Like I have a question. Anything else you want to share? That's where all of
Yes,
that
I
came out.
did. I did. You're right.
And I think it's like what I'm hearing from your like piece, like your answer just now, is that that awareness. Sometimes just that awareness has also supported you a lot in terms of like now that I know that's me, I need to reorient myself in the way that I organize myself, organize my work, so that I can uh, manage my anxiety and my reactions. Like
Yeah,
how
you're
can I turn
completely right.
reaction into responses? Yeah.
Yeah, entirely. I think the the rejection sensitive part of ADHD was probably the most business affecting part, aside from like brain fog and scattered thoughts and that sort of thing. Being rejection sensitive meant that criticism stayed with me. Criticism always felt personal. Uh, if and then that started to snowball as well. I remember for quite a while there was a period where in my headshot work for performers,
Mm.
um, it's always been one of those places where if the lighting works, if the lighting hits the right way, great. I'm thrilled with it. But if it doesn't, if it's like just a little bit off, I am going to try to find a euphemism here. I'm just going to beat myself up over how bad those photos came out. If the light is just 10% wrong in my opinion.
Mm.
And and so those things started to metastasize. They stuck around and um, intensified. And so I started beating myself up over smaller transgressions and smaller mistakes,
Mhm.
and then that just kind of held. And so, oh shit, I've lost my train of thought again. I'm so sorry. ADHD. Um,
Yeah, but I think what you're saying is that like the giving it as an example of like how that really plays out in real time in your
mhm,
work. That don't necessarily like we are making an assumption here, but don't necessarily another person that doesn't have that rejection sensitivity might not react to those things, or things might not stay with them for as long as it for you.
that's reasonable. That's entirely
Yeah.
reasonable. Uh, being aware of the ADHD now, I think is actually it's been a huge benefit. At no point have I felt the stigma that I grew up around regarding ADHD. I mean, being a '90s kid, when I was in school, especially like junior high and high school, if a kid had ADHD, they were like ostracized. They were on the outside of everyone because they were the weird hyperactive kid, or they were, the kid that was like mentally unstable, or like some tropey crap like that. That was what I grew up around. But that's not been my lived experience with ADHD at all. If anything, it's been a watershed of relief to have a diagnosis and um, to have this external thing that I can, it's a phrase I've been using, that I can hang my hat on and uh, place blame. I can place blame externally on this thing that has been afflicting me, as opposed to internalizing this anger and
Mm-hmm.
this finger pointing of, well, I'm the problem. I'm the deficient part of this conversation. It's not this thing, it's me. And now I've
Mm-hmm.
reversed that. The problem is here. And as soon as it's externalized, it's been a lot easier for me to to address it, um, to have conversations around it, and to actually work towards solutions, because I've now separated it from being a thing that I thought was actually just me. I thought I was a problem for a long time, where these problems
Yeah.
I was experiencing I felt for a long time that the problems I was experiencing were a reflection of poor character, and I let that
Mm,
feeling carry for most of my adult life. And that has finally subsided. And so not living with that has been everything, to be honest.
yeah. The moment that you're able to name it is ADHD, it becomes like something that's outside of you. It still exists, but it has a different distance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is, it's
Um.
really good.
Mhm.
I was going
Yeah.
to say it's been interesting to consider the rejection sensitivity around people's reactions to my work, because I'm not sensitive about that part. Whereas I would think, based on everything that I've described here and my lived experience so far, I would think that I would be. Um, I'm not concerned with people liking my photos. That's never really been a concern. What I concern myself with is whether people take a photo that I've taken and misrepresent what it is, especially in a lot of my artwork. And I go through periods of artwork creation where I work in a lot of nudity, or I work in like uh, upsetting themes and that sort of thing. And I have this like chip on my shoulder that somebody is going to accuse me of like untoward conduct, or that
Mm,
all the work is just they'll label all the work porn, or something like that, and that is a major apprehension, and that kind of rejection um, does bother me. But a client coming and saying that they don't like the work, there's solutions to that. We can make the work again. We can reshoot something, um, or find another solution. But I don't take that part personally. But all of the other bits,
right.
they go right to the heart, and I'm not actually sure even now why that element has managed to hold and not fall into the rest of this like self negativity.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing that like within like rejection sensitivity, there's also specificity to person. It's
I
like you're
think so.
saying that like there's a layer of like, you think that I'm like I will react to this, but actually there's something else that I'm like very specific sensitive to. And again, it's like it's powerful to figure out those nuances, and you're still figuring out more nuances is what I'm here.
It's
And
going to be a lifetime
and I
process from
want
here.
I'm sure it would. I want to like kind of um like bouncing off my thoughts. What this reminds me of is when we started working. I know that like I've said to you a couple of times, like I noticed that you have goals and wishes that is uh you don't want, like I don't want burnout, or I don't want like a lack of balance. I don't want to be working all the time anymore. And then and I remember at the time I pointed out to you, I've yet to hear like kind of goals that is like setting out in the affirmative sense. I want this and I want that. And I think there's a piece of that that is related to the rejection sensitivity, but more so like also the burnout of like when we are stressed and burnout all the time, we think about things that we don't want. But it's from my perspective, our journey has really been moving from that I don't want this to now I can figure out what I really want. What's your take
I
on
think
that?
that's very accurate. I think I did not before this interview. I did not go back and review my intake document, which I planned on doing, and I'd be willing to bet if I did, there are far more lines about what I don't want than what I do want. I'd be more than willing to bet that. Um, and that's oh wow, that's a really good pickup. Thank you for that thought.
Hmm?
um, because you're right. That was where I started most of these conversations at the beginning of the coaching. It was about how I'm tired of being tired. I'm tired of doing this solo. I'm over feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't actually remember giving you like a concrete goal in this moment. I'm sure that there was probably several. Uh, but the the intentionality that I came into the coaching process with was very much help me remove these things from the process.
Hmm.
Help me find efficiency. Help me remove doubt. Help me remove um, the burnout. I think was one of the early conversations as well.
Yes.
So um, no, I think that tracks. That tracks. I've done a lot of work to shift the goal setting into the affirmative, and now that we're on the other side of the coaching process, I feel like how that's even just the language that I'm using around what it is that I'm trying to work towards has shifted much more towards the positive. It's less about that soft apology to start a statement of intention, which I was definitely guilty of for a long time. Whereas now it's a statement of, well, I don't have all of the particulars in place, but this is the umbrella of what I'm working towards. And so yeah, the language used to self-describe has shifted for me as well. And I feel like that's a huge positive for me, because that negative self-talk is one of those places that I've been stuck in for years and years. And that's not to say that I'm past it or out of it, but the amount of negative self-talk that I am experiencing or that I'm letting just fall out um, casually is infinitely less than it has been.
Mm. I love that. I love that you point out the power of like language that we talk to. Like we are very cautious of like how we talk to other people, but we are not very aware of how we talk to ourselves all the time. And that shift is I think has helped you. And what I love what you share is that like I'm very cautious to tell people that like what when we work on it, it's not like the ending point is this perfect life that like there's no problem anymore and no problem in your business. But
Eight
you just said
sessions in,
something
you're
that
golden.
yeah, you're golden, the happy ever after Hollywood movie, right? And what I love what you share is like I don't have the particulars of like a a specific thing yet, but I know how to like kind of navigate that. You said something along the line just now. So tell us like what are your biggest takeaway from this our like 5 months of working one on one together, and how are you setting intention for 2023?
Cool. Well, let's tackle one question at a time. My biggest takeaways from the coaching process. I wrote a couple of notes on the side here. I'm going to go through first and see what that sparks. They're very basic feeling things, but I think that they actually might be important just to have spoken.
Yeah,
Uh,
love it. Mhm.
one of my first takeaways was very simply that it's okay to ask for help and it's okay not to know things. I feel like that's a lesson that I had forgotten a long while ago, and it was something I really needed the reminder on, and that was something we covered really early on. Is you gave me this safe space, this reassurance to not know stuff, to be in mid career and to still have early career stuff that I was still figuring out, and to create room to know that that was fine, that everyone figures um, solopreneurs figure out how to run businesses at different paces, and this is the pace that I'm on, and it's nobody else's pace, and that's fine. That's completely fine. And to really, and like even just as I'm saying that, I understand how cliche that sounds. It feels like a. I feel like there's a Simpsons quote or something like exactly just that at some point. Like one of those golden life lesson moments and from a sitcom. But it's true.
It's
It's
true.
absolutely
Yeah.
true. And to be able to internalize that feeling and not have this like sarcastic, oh yeah, that's just something that people say kind of thought in the back of my mind, like that's not there. Um, it's huge. It's absolutely. It's been like I keep doing this too, like to really
Mm,
like just express like it's meant so much to me to be able to have that particular apprehension just done away with. It doesn't exist for me in the same form at all anymore. Uh, to the same effect, I am aware that there are always people out there that want to help. There is always support available somewhere.
yes.
You have to track it down. It's not going to seek you out, um, and I think that is something that I don't want to say expected for a long time, but there was a part of me that just felt like there would be an arrival at some point. There would be
Mm,
somebody would arrive, or I would arrive on somebody's doorstep. Something would happen organically that that would create that solution, and I just had to chug along hard enough and consistently enough until that moment was located, and that was dumb. That was a real dumb mentality, and I'm glad to have moved past that as well. It's dumb is not the right phrasing. It was an idealistic mentality, and I am
mm.
happy to have moved on from that.
It's permission to get help. And I think what just want to
Permission.
quickly jump in
Yes.
there, and that like it's very natural to feel like it's well, I should have figured this out. I've been in this for a long time, and
Mhm.
I think you kind of shifted that thinking around. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then I think one of the most important things was coming to understand and appreciate the process of having my words mirrored back to me. Like we talked about that a few minutes ago. Um, having that mirroring soundboarding type process is also something that I've had a severe lack of in my personal life, my professional life, my career, across the board. I have had a very low amount of mentorship and coaching over the years. So to have that experience, the most significant, the most intense version of that experience to date here, and now being able to move forward with that, uh, I'm we talked about self-coaching at one point as well,
Yes.
and it's something that I've also been employing into my work, and this is the place where I think that's happening. I'm now, for times where we're not working together or in the in between of coaching, I would run the self-coaching process for myself and looking at sort of pros and cons and how to make decisions around it. Um, but that was a similar process to what we would do here, in that it was a lot of looking at my own thoughts, looking at my own wants, and having it reflected back. And that process of that exchange of information, that give and take of ideas, has been, like I say, an embarrassingly small part of my life up until now. And to be both given the space to know that that's okay and to be able to work forward from that place has made this process as successful as I can imagine it being.
Thank you for that. I'm really moved from hearing like your reflection of like of our process. And I know that like towards the end, especially towards the end of us working together for the 5 months, that you had some big ahas about your
Yeah.
own future. So I'm going to return to that question. What's in store for you
Oh, right. There was a part two of that question.
into the future?
So,
Yeah.
so over the last few months, I have been working much more in academic spaces. Um, I've been hired by several groups in the academic slash research part of Canadian theater to help with their work. Most notably, I was just a couple of weeks ago, I was at the University of Saskatchewan helping with a research project around how the color and intensity of stage lighting affects different skin tones from various racial backgrounds, and how that's combined with costuming choices, set painting choices, um, in order to make the best representation for individual performers and speakers on stages. And then there was a component of that for me was about documenting how that all translates to being recorded on camera. And then right now I'm working on creating a photo essay around that experience for as part of the research documentation. Uh, all of this is to say that I have started shifting my career path from being a freelancer into working more towards an education space. And I don't know what exactly that's going to look like in the end, which is part of the exciting part, I guess. Um, but I am at present right now. I am developing my first full length class. I teach a little bit. So I teach Adobe Lightroom and some stuff like that on Zoom right now. But I'm attempting to develop a 2-day workshop for photography for the stage, specifically around the work that I do, because there is a lack of general knowledge around how to best record performing arts. And one of the cliches that we experience growing up in theater is that typically the documentation of the show is like somebody's camera or phone on a tripod at the back of the room. So you get these little like overexposed like white blobs walking around on stage, and you're supposed to be able to interpret that as whether or not it was quality performance or production. Um, that's always bothered me. And so one of my professional goals has consistently been to get the best possible documentation of a stage production, dance or theater, to cover what the lighting looks like, what the costumes look like, the set looks like, um, and I do a very, very good job of that. But there aren't very many people that do. And that's not a swipe at people who do try to do this work. It's just that I feel like there is room to improve the overall quality of arts documentation. Um, and that goes for everywhere. In fact, that's why I got brought onto the U Saskatchewan, or part of why I got brought onto the U Saskatchewan project is because they were aware of the photography work that I do for theater and wanted to have that quality of documentation for their project. Um, I would like to create a little army of photographers that can all do that work and can document their own artwork. Up and coming actors that can self tape their monologues better, or that can document their student work. Um, this has come up quite a bit working with students. The University of Calgary here is one of my larger clients, and particularly the design students will come to me on a somewhat frequent basis and say, thank you for photographing just the empty stage with the lights on. I needed that for my portfolio. I needed that for this submission that's coming up. I needed it for grant applications. Uh, it's become clear that grants require higher and higher quality documentation in order to have projects considered as well. So I would like to bring the overall quality of arts documentation up. And I feel like one of the ways to do that is to train people as opposed to burning myself out and trying to be the one center point person that just does the photography. Uh, so that's been a really big deal for me.
I'm sensing the excitement
Yeah,
just as you talk about it.
there is.
Like,
There
it's
absolutely is.
amazing.
And that excitement is actually, I think, one of the things that is telling me that this is the right direction to move. Um,
Mm,
over the last five months, I've given you at least a handful of other potential things that I could go and do, and that is very much an ADHD thing. It's whatever the shiny thing that is in front of me is the most appealing. And so, over 5 months, we talked about maybe upgrading my studio, renovating the existing studio, moving out entirely, changing size of the country that I should be working in, going into the film industry, and like last year, I was talking about going into politics because that felt like the right thing to do at the time. And I approached all of those things with this sort of like medium tone of like, yeah, that would be a cool thing to do. That would be a great thing to do in this moment, and I could do this and this and this, and then what? And I think
mm,
referencing what I was talking about before, this is me getting 3 steps down the road and then running out of steam or running out of ideas of where I should be going next. Whereas that's not happening with this idea of moving into education. And I'm reluctant to use the word mentorship just because we're in a
yeah.
mentorship process here, and I don't feel like I have training for that. But um, I'm I'm very interested in being able to offer my skill set to people as a function of training, as something that is trainable. I don't think photography is something that can't be trained. There are Everyone has their own natural predilection to artistry, and I would like to see what that can grow into in other people, if they're given the base level tool set that I can offer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so 6 months from now, the hope is that I've got the workshop funded and underway, and I'm on my way to doing the 2.0 version, which would be hopefully a 12-week class that can be taught at post-secondary, um, or a week-long intensive that can be toured through either post-secondaries or through different theatrical groups. I would like to make a course that I can make mobile, that I can bring
Wow.
to various groups, various cities, and allow a little bit of freedom of movement. I think that would be really ideal.
Mm-hmm. I'm very excited for you because, like, given you talk about like there were other options, but like this one stays because I think it kind of hits the bullseye between the
Yeah,
intersection of your artist self, your mentor self, and the historian and educator in you. And
I would agree.
I can't wait to catch up with you. Like you just said 6 months ago, but not to hold you accountable for the time frame, of course. But like I would love to see like by the end of next year, for example, where you're at with like your new initiatives.
I expect that you and I are going to stay in touch, Benny. I would love to have a touch base with you here and there. But um, going into next year, you and I are probably going to be having more conversations anyhow, if I recall
Yeah.
from
Yes,
previous.
for sure. Yeah. Well, perhaps the ending of this conversation,
Hmm.
I will ask you pardon me for my two-part question today, but I'm really curious of like, what would your advice be for someone who, so two types of people. One is someone that's just starting to decide they would become a solopreneur in their arts business. Second is people who are similar to yourself, who've been in this for a while, mid-career, and are feeling a little bit of low. So, what's your kind of like 2 cents for if you were to speak to these two group of people? What would you say to them?
Oh boy, big question to end on. To both groups, I say coaching works. Coaching works. I I resisted the idea of giving this much of myself over to somebody for quite a long time in order to receive um, the kind of thoughtful advice that I've received over the last 6 months, and it has been completely game changing. Deciding to be a solo artist is probably one of the scariest career decisions I've ever made. Working in the arts as a whole is a bumpy road. There are very few assurances. It is criminally underfunded in a lot of centers, and is something that you tend to find people work in because the passion drives them, not the money. And that was an appealing thing for me. If you're less driven by income than by the desire to make the art. Um, Other advice: find your mentors. Find the mentors really early on. One of the regrets that I have throughout this process is the realization of where I feel like I could have been by now if I had had the mentorship, if I'd had the coaching. Um, and it's taken on this kind of like mournful feeling at times, like mourning for something that could have been. I'm trying not to lean into that too much, but I do feel like um, there's a cautionary tale there that I'm happy to be for people. So find your mentors. And on a personal note, if you suspect you might have ADHD, go get checked. Go seek out a diagnosis or a non-diagnosis, whatever the phrasing for that is. But um, that is the other part that I've spent a greater part of the pandemic mourning for, is wishing that I had known that sooner so I could have addressed it and I could have approached other parts of my career differently.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that too much of a bummer to end on?
I don't think so because I mean, you know what it reminds me is when like recently I got asked like, what would you like? I don't remember where I got asked. What would your advice be for like undergraduates or something? And I said like, I wish that when I was undergraduate, like I was focusing less on the achievement of like marks and whatnot, but I really got to know myself better, like for a therapist or something, so that like those emotional stuff like don't come out like and hit me so hard later. Of course, there's no revising it back in time, but like, your answer kind of reminded me of like if I had like, build a community of support, I think is what you're getting at.
It is. It is.
If I had named some stuff about myself earlier, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if I had known X, Y, and Z about myself sooner, I probably would have um, not made some of the decisions that I have, and my career may have taken on a faster trajectory, a more profitable one. I don't know. Um, I'm not I'm not sitting here yearning for what could have been. However, I am simply wishing that I had some of that time back, and the fact that I don't, I can accept that. It just means that I have to do more, or I have to be more efficient with the time that I do have going forward.
Mhm,
And so,
mhm,
in my case, that is going to be to bring these skills to more people. It's going to be moving into an education space where I feel like I can benefit the performing arts community more broadly by creating more photographers, more documentarians in the community that will maybe not stay in Calgary, maybe go to Vancouver, maybe go to the States, maybe go um, wherever life takes them, and have that skill set to better document their own art, even if it's not stage art, even if it's documenting paintings, or if it's documenting um, whatever else people want to pour from themselves onto the digital image. I feel like I have the tool set that will bring bring that up in more people, and I'm looking
mhm.
forward to being able to do that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to catch up with you. I know, like for the audience sake, we are recording this end of 2022. By the time this air,
Hmm.
it will be 2023, and hopefully by then we will have a conversation catching up. But thank you so much, team. This has been wonderful, and I truly cannot like thank you more enough for like being so open in sharing your journey. Like I want to acknowledge like that, like some of the stuff, many of the stuff that you talk about today, you could have choose not to share to your audience, but you did, and I think it also speaks to your kind of openness to vulnerability and wanting to share your story with the community.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. It's been an incredible process working with you throughout coaching. I have recordings of all of the sessions that we did, and at some point, probably before this podcast airs, I'm going to sit down and review all of them. And while I don't think that the information from the beginning podcast is necessarily as relevant anymore because of how many pivots I've taken, I do feel like um, I feel like being able to see that process externally happen or unfold in front of me again over the course of 8 or 10 hours of recording, um, I think is going to be a reminder of this is how far I've come in this short of a period of time. Let's see what the next 5 or 6 months creates.
Perfect. It'll be very affirming. Yeah.
Yes, I think so. I think so. I'm looking forward to it.
Did you enjoy this conversation with Tim? I'm just so thankful and would like to extend a warm thank you again to Tim. Tim, if you're listening, I'm so thankful for you for being so open and raw with your reflections and sharing that with everyone on this podcast. I'm amazed that, like, in full circle fashion, we got to get Tim on the podcast because initially he actually connected or reached out to me after he listened to one of the early episodes on the podcast. I guess that's just kind of the magic of this platform, which is connecting with more of you, listening to your stories, and having you listen to other creators and sometimes my story as well. We are creating this little community here that support each other's creative practice, and I'm really grateful and thankful. If you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to it on whichever platform you're listening. And if you happen to be on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review and a rating. That will go a long way for others to discover this podcast. If you happen to be on YouTube, which we newly launched, please subscribe to our channel as well. If you're like Tim, who is a creative looking to transition in your practice or in your career, and you're looking for support to build an authentic, profitable, and value-aligned creative practice, we should chat. I've helped creatives to do just that and achieve new clarity and obtain more freedom in their day-to-day. Book a free consult call with me today. The link is in the show notes. Thank you so much. May we create more possibilities in our creative career, one decision at a time. See you next time.